You're my daddy's date now.
Marcus Vance had rehearsed the apology twice on the way up in the elevator. He wasn't supposed to bring his daughter on a first date. The sitter had canceled 40 minutes ago, and the woman he'd matched with had insisted, tonight, this restaurant, no rescheduling. So he'd zipped Maya into her good pink cardigan, promised her dessert, and hoped. The restaurant sat 40 floors above the city, all amber light and low music, the skyline burning gold through the glass. Marcus stood there in his charcoal Henley among men in pressed suits and felt every inch of the distance between his world and this one. Maya, 6 years old and fearless, tugged his hand and whispered that the candles looked like tiny stars. His date was already at the table. She looked up, saw the little girl, and something in her face quietly closed like a door. "You didn't mention a kid," she said. Then she reached for her purse, said she'd be right back, and never came back. Marcus stood there a full minute after he understood. The waiter drifted over, then away. Maya looked up with those bright, searching eyes, and he made himself smile so she wouldn't ask why. That was when he noticed the woman, 2 tables over. She sat alone in a tan blazer, wavy hair catching the light, an untouched glass of red wine in front of her, and an empty chair across from her that no one was coming back to fill. She was beautiful in a still, composed way, and she was seated in a wheelchair, positioned neatly at the head of the table, her chin lifted like she'd decided long ago never to let anyone see her flinch. But Marcus saw it. The same fresh rejection he was wearing, she was wearing too. Maya saw it before he could stop her. She let go of his hand, crossed the space between the tables in 4 quick steps, planted her feet, and pointed one small finger straight at the stranger. "You're my daddy's date now," Maya announced, loud enough that the couple beside them turned to look. The woman's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus felt the heat climb his neck. He opened his mouth to apologize, to scoop his daughter up and disappear down 40 floors and never come back, and nothing came out. The woman was staring at Maya, then at him. And underneath all that shock, at the very edge of her lips, something else was starting. The smallest, most disbelieving beginning of a smile. He had no idea who she was. He didn't know that the woman his daughter had just claimed held the controlling shares of the very company, tearing down the community center he'd spent 2 years fighting to save. He didn't know her name sat at the top of a letterhead he'd cursed 100 times over. He only saw a stranger who'd just been left behind, same as him, on a night that was supposed to go differently for them both. Outside, the city glittered on, indifferent, 40 floors below, and at a candlelit table for 2, that had suddenly become a table for 3, no one moved. If a 6-year-old can rewrite 2 strangers' entire lives in a single sentence, trust me, you do not want to miss where this one goes. Tap subscribe so the next chapter finds you first. And before you scroll on, tell me in the comments exactly where you're watching from. Your city, your country, your little corner of the map. Drop it below. I read every single one, and I'd love to wave hello and see just how far this story is traveling tonight. The woman 2 tables over did not laugh the way people usually laughed at Maya. Quick and polite and eager to move on. She laughed like something had been knocked loose in her chest. One hand still pressed to her mouth, the other gripping the arm of her wheelchair, and the sound came out cracked at the edges, as if it had been a long time since she'd let one out at full size. "Well," she said, when she could speak, "that's the best offer I've had all night." Marcus finally found his voice. "I am so sorry. She does this. She just decides things." He put a hand on Maya's shoulder, gently, the way you'd steer a small runaway train. "Baby, we don't point at strangers, remember? She's not a stranger," Maya said, with the flat certainty of someone reciting a law of physics. "She's sad, and you're sad, and I'm hungry, and there's a whole empty chair right there." The woman looked at Marcus over Maya's head, and for a second neither of them said anything. Because the girl had said the true thing out loud, and there was no taking it back. Marcus's date had walked out 20 minutes ago. The woman's table had an empty seat across from it that no one was coming back to fill. They were 2 people who had both showered and dressed up and shown up and been left. And a 6-year-old in a pink cardigan had marched straight through every polite fiction in the room to name it. "I'm Elena," the woman said. She gestured at the empty chair, then the whole table, then the small, serious girl in front of her. "Sit, both of you, before your daughter starts negotiating with the waitstaff." "Too late," Marcus said, because Maya had already turned to flag one down, and Elena laughed again, softer this time, and something in the amber-lit room loosened. They ordered too much food. Maya got her promised dessert, and then, by a campaign of relentless charm aimed entirely at Elena, a second one. Somewhere between the breadbasket and the entrees, the stiffness went out of Marcus's shoulders. Elena was easy in a way that surprised him. Sharp, funny, quick to tease, quicker to laugh at herself. She asked Maya questions like the answers mattered, and Maya, who had a very finely tuned sense for adults who were only pretending to listen, decided within 10 minutes that this woman was to be trusted with everything. "So," Elena said to Marcus, twirling the stem of her wine glass. "Blind date? Is it that obvious? You have the look, the freshly abandoned look. I'm something of an expert." She said it lightly, the way you'd mentioned the weather. Mine took one glance at the chair, told me he'd left his wallet in the car, and evaporated. Very smooth. Didn't even finish his water. Marcus watched her fingers tighten around the glass as she said it, saw the smile stay put by sheer force of will, and understood that it was not a joke, that it had never once been a joke. "Mine didn't even make it to the wallet excuse," he said. She saw Maya walk in and suddenly remembered somewhere very important she had to be. "People are cowards," Elena said. "They leave the second something asks a little more of them than they plan to give." "Not everyone," she looked at him then, properly, the way you look at someone when you're deciding whether to believe them. "No," she said. "I suppose not everyone." The evening stretched long and warm. Marcus told her about the gardens he designed. The way a good landscape wasn't decoration but a kind of invitation, a place that made people want to stay. Elena told him about old buildings, how she could walk into a 100-year-old room and read the whole life of it in the moldings and the light. Maya interrupted both of them constantly, and neither of them minded. And when the girl finally lost the war with sleep and slumped sideways in the booth with frosting on her cheek, it was Elena who noticed first, and Elena who said, very quietly, "She likes you an alarming amount, you know. You must be doing something right." "I'm doing everything wrong all the time," Marcus said. "I just try to do it in her direction." Elena went still at that, like the sentence had touched something she wasn't ready to have touched. Then she cleared her throat and asked for the check, and would not let him pay, and waved off his protest with a look that ended the argument before it began. He carried Maya to the elevator. Elena rolled beside them. At the bottom of 40 floors, they stood on the sidewalk in the cool city dark, and neither of them wanted to be the one to leave, so they didn't, not for a while. They stood there and talked about nothing until Maya stirred against his shoulder. Then Marcus asked for her number, feeling 16 years old, and Elena gave it. And she watched his beat-up truck pull away with his sleeping daughter buckled inside. And for the first time in longer than she could measure, she did not feel like the woman everyone walked away from. She felt like the woman someone had asked to stay. Marcus woke the next morning to his phone buzzing itself off the nightstand and his brother-in-law's voice crowing on the other end. "You're on the news, man. Turn it on, turn it on." He fumbled for the remote. And there he was. Grainy footage from last week's rally. 40 neighbors on the steps of the old Fairview Community Center. Marcus at the front with a borrowed bullhorn. The historic brick building behind him, draped in the banners the kids had painted by hand. The anchor called it a grassroots fight. A local landscape architect leading ordinary residents against a demolition order. The last community pool and after-school program on the east side, slated to become luxury towers. Marcus felt a small, fierce pride watching it. 2 years of petitions, council meetings, doors knocked in the rain. Somebody was finally paying attention. Then the segment changed. The screen filled with a sleek corporate logo, Alvarez Holdings, and the anchor's voice went breathless and admiring. The city's largest development firm was welcoming home its long-absent heiress after years abroad, a return that insiders said would reshape the entire skyline. And there, in a photograph, in a sharp blazer with her chin lifted, at exactly the angle he'd watched all through dinner, was Elena. Marcus sat very still. The cereal went soggy in the bowl. He turned the television off. He told himself there were 100 Alvarezes in a city this size. He told himself the woman who'd laughed until her voice cracked, who'd let his daughter drool on her cashmere sleeve, could not possibly share a name with the letterhead on the eviction notices stacked 3 inches deep on his desk. He told himself this all the way through breakfast, and he only half believed it. And when Elena texted him a photo of 2 dessert menus with the message for next time, "I'm choosing yours," he decided, cowardly and hopeful not to ask. Not yet. Not while it still felt this good. They met again 3 days later at Riverside Park, because Maya had demanded it in writing, an actual crayon note slipped under his coffee cup, and because Marcus couldn't afford another 40-floor dinner and was too proud to say so. It turned out not to matter. Elena arrived with a kite shaped like a dragon and a bag of the good bakery cookies. And within an hour, Maya had appointed her keeper of all secrets, an office of great importance in Maya's private government. They sat on a blanket by the pond, and Elena taught Maya to skip stones. Badly, both of them. The flat rocks going plunk, plunk, plunk straight to the bottom, the two of them shrieking with laughter at every failure. Elena couldn't get down to the water's edge, so Maya became her official stone runner, sprinting back and forth with the flattest ones she could find, presenting each like a jewel. And Marcus sat on the blanket and watched his daughter lean her entire weight against this woman she'd known for one dinner and one park afternoon, trusting completely, the way children trust before the world teaches them to hold something back. It should have made him nothing but happy. Mostly it did, but Elena's coat was cashmere, and her watch cost more than his truck, and when a jogger slowed to do a double take of recognition at her face, Marcus felt the gap between their worlds crack open like a fault line under the blanket. She lived somewhere he'd never be invited. He fixed rich people's gardens and fought a losing war for a building that wasn't even his. He didn't know what a woman like that could possibly want with a man like him, except maybe an afternoon, a novelty, a charming little story to tell her friends later. "You've gone somewhere," Elena said quietly, while Maya chased ducks along the bank. "I can see it happen on your face. Where'd you go?" "Nowhere. I'm right here." "Marcus." She waited until he looked at her. "I have spent my entire life watching people decide who I am before I say a single word. The chair does it for them. Don't you do it to me too? Whatever you just decided about me, say it out loud instead." So he did, haltingly. Then all at once, he told her about the cookies and the kite, how he'd chosen this park because he couldn't have managed the restaurant twice, how he lay awake some nights doing math that never worked out. Elena listened without a flicker of pity, which was the only thing that made it bearable. When he finished, she was quiet a moment. Then she said, "Do you know what I did on my last 3 dates before you?" "Nothing. Because they never showed up. Or they showed up and left. You cooked in your head all week to figure out how to see me again. Parks are better than restaurants, Marcus. I promise you they are." And she reached over and stole his coffee, and drank it, and made a face because he took it with too much sugar, and the fault line quietly closed. He invited her to dinner at his house that Friday. He cooked, actually cooked, his mother's braised recipe, the one thing he could put in front of anyone without apology. Maya set the table with the good plates and jammed a fistful of dandelions into a jelly jar for a centerpiece. Elena rolled through his front door into a small, warm house, crowded with crayon drawings taped to every wall at knee height, and she looked around slowly, like she was memorizing it, like she'd wandered into somewhere she was plainly, uncomplicatedly wanted, and didn't quite know what to do with the feeling. Dinner was perfect. Maya narrated the entire plot of a cartoon with full sound effects. Elena asked follow-up questions. Marcus watched the two of them and felt something dangerous and enormous open up in his chest, something that felt a lot like the beginning of a family. Then Elena rolled toward the kitchen to help clear the plates and past the desk and stopped. Marcus had left the blueprints out. He always did. They lived on that desk, the Fairview drawings, his hand-inked plans for a restored and fully accessible community center. Wide doorways, long gentle ramps, a garden designed for wheelchairs and walkers and 80-year-old knees, raised beds you could reach from a seated position, smooth paths, a fountain in the middle. Elena's eyes moved over the site plan, the address, the parcel number stamped in the corner in official ink. The color drained out of her face. "Where did you get these?" she said. Her voice had changed completely. "They're mine. It's my project. The center. The one from the news." "Why?" "Elena, what's wrong?" Elena closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet, and her voice came out very small and very level, the voice of someone forcing themselves to say a thing they'd give anything not to say. "Marcus, the demolition order on that building, the company behind it." She stopped, made herself continue. "It's us. It's my family's firm. My name is on that order. I'm the majority shareholder. I'm the reason your building is coming down." The room went silent the way the bar had gone silent that first night. All the warmth pulled out of it in a single breath, leaving only the two of them and the terrible new fact standing between them. "I knew," Marcus said. "The news. I saw the news 3 days ago. I didn't know it was yours." She was crying now, openly, furious at herself, not at him. "Marcus, I came home to stop what my brother's been doing with this company. I've been fighting him. I didn't connect the building on the news to you. I swear on anything you want. I did not connect it until this exact second, standing in your house, looking at your little girl's drawings taped to your wall." Maya appeared in the kitchen doorway, dish towel in her hands, looking between the two adults she'd decided to love. She didn't understand the words. She only understood that the air had gone wrong, and Marcus looked at Elena, at the tears, at the empire behind her name, at the machine that wanted to flatten everything he'd bled 2 years to save, and could not tell, in that moment, whether the best thing that had happened to him in years was also going to be the thing that broke him. Elena did not run. That was what Marcus kept circling back to over the following week, lying awake, turning it over. She could have. She didn't. She stayed at that table until midnight and swore she would fight her own family before she let that building fall, and swore it again, and meant it. And slowly, carefully, against every instinct, he let himself believe her, because Maya believed her without a second's doubt, and because when Elena looked at him, there was nothing rehearsed anywhere in it. But someone had been watching all along. Elena's brother Victor ran the firm day to day, a lean, smiling man who wore the family name like a blade he kept sharpened, and he'd had eyes on his sister from the moment she landed. A driver mentioned the park, a photographer mentioned the little house on the east side, and Victor, who understood to the decimal exactly how much power his sister's dormant shares could strip from him if she ever fully woke up, saw the whole shape of the threat at once: the activist, the child, the softening, opening heiress, and decided to cut it off at the root before it could grow. He came to Elena's apartment uninvited on a Sunday evening, poured himself a drink she hadn't offered, and set a manila folder on her glass table with a soft, deliberate slap. "The landscape architect," Victor said, pleasant as ever. "Cute story. The noble single dad. It plays beautifully. I'll give him that." He tapped the folder twice. "So here's how this goes, Elena. You keep playing house with the man running a public campaign against our biggest project, and I make certain every outlet in this city hears the real version. A broke activist who targeted the poor disabled heiress, seduced her for her shares and her sympathy, and used the whole sad arrangement to save his little building. I have 3 reporters who'll run it Monday morning. You wouldn't, and that's before we get to the child." He smiled, warming to it. "A man who drags his 6-year-old to protests, parades her in front of cameras, uses her as a prop for public sympathy. You know how that reads in a family court filing? You think a judge lets a man like that keep his daughter?" Elena's hands were shaking on the armrests. "You would not touch that little girl. I'll touch whatever keeps this company mine." He stood and buttoned his coat, unhurried. "Walk away from him, Elena. Clean and quiet, and no one gets hurt. Or don't, and I burn the man to the ground and let the girl go up with the smoke. You were always so good at being alone." He paused at the door. "Go back to it. It suited you." He left the folder on the table. Elena sat with it a long time and did not open it, because she already knew what it was. The same lesson the family had taught her 1,000 times in 1,000 quiet ways. That everything she loved could be taken from her. That she was safest wanting nothing at all. The photographers found Maya's school on a Tuesday. They were massed at the fence when the final bell rang, a knot of them with long lenses, and they surged the instant Marcus's truck pulled to the curb. He barely had the door open before they were on him, shouting Elena's name, shouting words like gold digger and scandal and, "Is it true she's paying you?" And Maya froze on the sidewalk in her pink cardigan with her backpack too big for her narrow shoulders, cameras flashing white in her small, startled face, not understanding a word of it, only that grown men were yelling and pointing at her daddy. A teacher rushed out and pulled her back through the doors. Marcus shoved through the crush with his jaw locked and his heart slamming his ribs, reached his daughter, and folded her against him. And over her head he saw the lenses still clicking, still feeding, still turning his child into tomorrow's picture. That night, bathed and pajamaed and small in her bed, Maya asked if she had done something wrong. She asked why the men were so angry. She asked, in the smallest voice he'd ever heard from her, whether the yelling was going to happen every day now. Marcus told her no, never. It was grown-up nonsense that had nothing to do with her. And then he sat on the edge of her bed, long after she'd fallen asleep, and understood, with a cold and total certainty, that he could not protect her from this. He had spent every day of her life making sure his daughter never once felt like a burden or a target. And tonight she'd stood on a public sidewalk while strangers turned her into a headline. Because of him. Because of who he had let himself want, out loud, in front of a world that was always looking for someone to tear apart. He called Elena the next morning and ended it before he could lose his nerve. "It's not you," he said, and hated how thin and small it came out. "You have to know it's not you. It's that I cannot do this to her. She was terrified, Elena. I have to keep her safe, and that has to come before anything. Before me. Before this." His voice cracked straight down the middle. "I'm sorry. I can't. Marcus, please, let me. Don't. Please don't make it harder than it already is." He hung up, and in her bright, enormous, empty apartment, 40 floors above the city, Elena set the phone down in her lap and felt the door close again. The old, familiar door. The one that had shut on her 33 separate times. Always the same soft final click. She told herself he was right. She told herself the safest, most loving thing she could do for the people she'd let herself care about was to stay far away from them, where her name and her family couldn't reach. She had believed exactly that her whole life. It was practically the only thing anyone had ever taught her to believe. But she was angry now, in a way she had not been in years. A clean, clarifying anger. And so instead of retreating into the quiet the way she always had, she went to work. She still held the shares. She still had access to every file. That night, she pulled the company's records and read years of Victor's ledgers, the shell accounts, the quiet little payments filed under blandly forgettable names. She read until the windows went from black to gray, hunting for anything, any thread, that might stop her brother from doing to Marcus what he'd done to so many people before him. She found something, not the thing she was looking for. Something far worse. A single payment, dated the night she'd met Marcus. The name attached to it was the man who had stood her up at the restaurant, the date with the wallet in the car and the vanishing act. Victor had paid him. And then, as she scrolled back with a growing cold horror, she found others. Dozens. Going back years. One for nearly every catastrophic evening she had ever endured. Every man who'd looked at the chair and fled. Every polite disappearance she had privately, quietly filed away as proof that she simply was not worth staying for. It had not been the world teaching her to expect nothing. It had been her brother, deliberately, for years, buying her loneliness by the date, keeping her isolated and grateful and easy to manage, so that she would never come home, never wake up, never claim her seat, never sit across a candlelit table from anyone who might actually, stubbornly, choose to stay. 33 canceled dates. He had engineered every single one. Elena sat in the gray dawn and did not cry. She had cried enough for one lifetime, most of it over men her own brother had hired. Instead, something cold and clear and unfamiliar settled over her, and for the first time in her life she saw the entire architecture of her own captivity laid out plainly in a spreadsheet. The walls, the locks, the hand that had built them, and she decided, quietly, that she was finished living inside it. While Elena read ledgers through the night, Maya was quietly running an operation of her own. She had noticed things. She noticed everything. She'd noticed that her father had stopped humming while he cooked, that he turned his phone face down on the table now, that the nice lady with the pretty broken laugh had stopped coming, and that every single time Maya said her name, her daddy's face did something quick and sad, and then hurried to pretend it hadn't. Maya was 6 years old, but she was not stupid, and she had concluded, in the same absolute way she concluded all things, that this situation was wrong, and that since the grown-ups were clearly not going to fix it, she would have to. So one afternoon, while Marcus was in the shower with the water running, Maya climbed onto a kitchen chair, took his phone off the counter, found the contact with the little photo of the three of them squinting into the sun at the park, and pressed the green button with great ceremony. "Maya?" Elena's voice came through, instantly careful, instantly worried. "Sweetheart, is everything okay? Is your dad all right?" "My daddy doesn't smile anymore," Maya reported, businesslike. "Not the real smile. He does the pretend one for me, but I can always tell the difference. The real one goes all the way up to his eyes, and the pretend one stops in the middle." She paused, gathering herself for the important part. "He was happy when you were here. I was happy. Everybody was happy. So can you please come back? I'll say please as many times as you want. Please can you be my daddy's date again?" There was a long silence on the line. When Elena finally spoke, her voice was thick and unsteady. "Maya, sweetheart, I need you to do one very important thing for me. Can you keep a secret? A good one, the best kind. Just for a few days." "I'm the keeper of all secrets," Maya said, deeply offended that it needed asking. "It's my actual job. I will fix everything and make sure everything get back to normal," Elena said, and Maya could hear her smiling through the tears. "Yes, it certainly is." The vote on the Fairview Community Center was set for the City Council's annual zoning gala, a glittering affair beneath the vaulted marble of the City Hall atrium. And Victor Alvarez arrived that evening like a man walking to collect something already his. The demolition required the council's rezoning approval. The firm had spent months and a great deal of money making certain the approval would sail through. Victor had personally invited the press. He wanted the win witnessed. He wanted an audience. He also wanted Marcus there, and had arranged it. The community coalition was granted a brief speaking slot, a last symbolic gesture of protest before the machines rolled in. Marcus came in a borrowed suit that pinched at the shoulders, and stood at the edge of all that marble and money, with his neighbors gathered close around him. He did not know Elena was in the room until he caught sight of her across the atrium, in a deep red dress, her chin lifted at that familiar defiant angle, watching her brother with an expression Marcus couldn't begin to read. Victor took the podium first. He was smooth as glass, gracious, faintly regretful, a statesman of progress. Growth required sacrifice. The old building was, sadly, a hazard. The community would be so much better served by what would rise in its place. Then his tone cooled and sharpened, and Marcus's stomach dropped through the floor, because Victor turned toward him, and every camera in the room turned to follow. Before this council votes, Victor said, the public deserves to know the truth about the man leading this so-called grassroots opposition. Mr. Vance has presented himself as a humble, concerned father. What he has carefully hidden is that for the past several weeks he has been romancing my sister, a woman with a significant stake in this very firm, in a cold, calculated effort to sway this deal in his favor. I have documentation. I have photographs. This is not activism, ladies and gentlemen. This is a con man exploiting a vulnerable woman and parading his own child for personal profit. The atrium erupted. Cameras swung as one to Marcus, who stood frozen in his too-tight suit, the lie so vast and so public and so instantly believed that he couldn't find a single loose thread to begin pulling it apart. This was the wreckage Victor had promised her. This was Maya's father, remade into a fraud in front of the entire city, and there was nothing he could say that wouldn't sound exactly like a guilty man saying it. Then a voice cut clean through the noise, steady and amplified and unafraid. Elena had rolled up to the second microphone at the base of the stage. My brother is right about one thing, she said, and the enormous room went abruptly, completely silent. I do have a significant stake in this firm. In fact, Victor, correct me if the paperwork's changed. I'm the majority shareholder, which means, all this time, you haven't been running your company. You've been running mine. She let that settle over the crowd like snow. And since it is mine, she continued, let me share what I found in its books this week. She lifted a folder into the light, the same kind of folder he had once left on her glass table. Payments, years of them, made to men my brother hired to stand me up before a single date could begin. 33 of them, to be exact. One for very nearly every man I ever tried to meet. Because a lonely, isolated sister who believes she isn't worth staying for, a sister who never comes home and never asks questions, is a great deal easier to quietly steal a company from than one who wakes up and claims her seat at the table. Her voice did not waver once. He weaponized my life. He built a wall around it, brick by brick, and he counted on me never noticing the mortar. He counted on me believing I was unlovable. And for a long time, it worked. She looked out at the frozen room. He was wrong. Victor was saying something now, loudly, calling it fabrication, calling her unstable. But not one reporter was pointed at him anymore. Every lens in the atrium had swung to the woman in the red dress, with the ledgers in her steady hands. As majority shareholder, Elena said, turning to the council, I'm exercising my authority. Effective immediately, this firm is withdrawing its demolition application for the Fairview parcel. A murmur rose and broke like a wave. And I am signing that parcel, in full, over to the community land trust that Mr. Vance established. It was never ours to take. It belongs to the neighborhood, and it always did. She signed it right there, on the corner of the podium, in front of 100 flashing cameras. The deed to everything Marcus had bled 2 years to protect, handed freely to the people who had fought for it. Victor stood abandoned in the center of all that marble, his empire dismantling itself in real time around him, and there was no longer a single person in the room listening to a word he said. Marcus crossed the atrium. He didn't care about the cameras, or the borrowed suit, or the 100 important people turning to watch. He walked past the startled security guards and straight up to Elena, and knelt down beside her chair so that their eyes were level. And everything he hadn't been able to say through a phone, he said now, with his whole unguarded face, close enough that only she could hear. I got scared, he said. I ran. I told myself it was for Maya, but I ran, and I'm so sorry. I know, Elena said softly. So did I. 33 times, remember. We're a matched set. She lifted her hand and pressed it to his cheek, right there in front of the whole city. So let's both of us stop running now. I'm tired of it. Aren't you? Behind the velvet barrier, held up in her grandmother's arms so she could see over the crowd, Maya watched her secret come true at last and beamed so hard and so completely that her whole face ached with it. A year later, the Fairview Community Center reopened its doors, and they'd renamed it before anyone cut a single ribbon. The wide new sign above the long, gentle, ramped entrance read, Vance Community Center. and every doorway inside was broad enough to roll through without turning sideways. And the garden Marcus had drawn on those blueprints so long ago was real now. Raised beds at wheelchair height, smooth winding paths, and the fountain in the middle that Maya had personally selected after a loud and thorough review of every option. Elena had built an accessible design firm out of the ashes of her family's company, and it had designed and built half of everything that now stood on the block. Victor's name appeared in different headlines these days, the kind that came attached to the words federal investigation. The whole neighborhood had turned out for the reopening, kids shrieking in the reopened pool, old men laying down dominoes in the shade of the young trees Marcus had planted precisely so they'd have somewhere cool to sit. At the center of the whole warm chaos, Maya reached up and confiscated the ribbon-cutting scissors directly from the mayor's hands, having privately decided she was the only correct person for the job, and everyone laughed and let her have them. Then she turned to her father and gave him a slow, grave, deliberate nod, their signal, the one they'd rehearsed all week in the kitchen. Marcus knelt down beside Elena's chair, exactly as he had on the marble floor a year before, except this time there was a small velvet box balanced in his open hand. "You were my daughter's idea," he said, loud enough now for everyone to hear. "The best idea she ever had, and she has a lot of them. Marry me, Elena. Be our date forever. No more canceling." Elena laughed until her voice cracked straight down the middle. The exact same laugh from the very first night, the one that had knocked something loose inside her chest and never once put it back. She said yes before he'd even finished the sentence, said it twice more for good measure, and Maya flung both arms around the pair of them at once and held on. The whole neighborhood cheered fit to wake the block, and the woman everyone had spent a lifetime walking away from sat in the middle of a crowd of people who had each, over and out loud, chosen to stay. And that's the whole story. 3 lonely people rewritten forever by one fearless little girl and a single pointed finger. If this one worked its way into your heart the way it worked its way into mine while I told it, do me one small kindness and hit that subscribe button, so the very next story reaches you the second it goes live. But here's the thing I'm truly curious about tonight. What part of this beautiful planet are you watching from right now? Drop your city and your country down in the comments. I read through every last one of them myself, and honestly, there's nothing I love more than replying with the biggest, warmest hello I can type, and watching this little family travel to corners of the world I've never even seen. So go on, tell me where you are. I'll be right there in the comments, waiting to say hello.